Well, here we go. Thank you so much for joining. First, I hope you and yours are well in this time of crisis. We're facing a global pandemic for the first time in our lives, and I know it's hard to be so far away from many people that we love. I hope you remain healthy through this difficult time. Now, usually I'm traveling throughout our Maine to Florida corridor, thanking you and sharing updates in person, but that's not in the cards right now. So I appreciate you participating in our first virtual State of the Greenway event. And I want to thank you. You have made a remarkable decade of transformation possible, and 2019 really was the exclamation point. This afternoon, I'll review highlights from our new annual report. We'll hear from several of our amazing staff, as well as a dedicated leading donor of our effort. And then I will share a special announcement. Attendees of this State of the Greenway virtual event are a who's who of Greenway heroines and heroes. When I took the baton from our outstanding co-founder, Karen Votava of Rhode Island, just over 10 years ago, our organization was working its way out of the Great Recession. She and fellow co-founder Pat King of Massachusetts had built a strong foundation, and they continue to share their Greenway wisdom with our organization through the advisory board. And now, but 10 years ago alone, from trustee and donor Elizabeth Brody of New York, who's on the call today, kept us afloat. We had little money in our bank account, but we had a great team of people, including 4 wonderful staff and a supportive board led by Chuck Flink of North Carolina and David Reed of Massachusetts. We did our best to cover the whole Eastern Seaboard and to build on the just over 500 miles of our route that was off-road trail. We made outstanding progress, largely thanks to the generous support from people like you, from Margaret Bloom in Florida, Don Passantino in New York, to the William Penn Foundation of Philadelphia. And the results of our work speak volumes. Today, 1,000 miles of Greenway are hosting more than 40 million bike rides, runs, and walks per year. In fact, we project this year's surge in use to make the East Coast Greenway the most visited park in America. You made that possible. Time and again, you stepped up when we needed you. When we needed your help to triple our staff capacity, to accelerate Greenway progress, you gave us those resources. Your donations were critical as we increased our network of supporters and followers by an order of magnitude to 120,000 people, receiving and sharing publications, e-news, social media, and advocating for more progress. Thank you. Now, this year, we face both new needs and new opportunities. As New York City Parks Commissioner Mitchell Silver recently said, the COVID crisis has transformed greenways and parks from nice to haves to necessary sanctuaries of sanity, havens of health. But before I get into 2020, let's take a look at the record impact we made in 2019. Let's look at our annual report. Thank you to Communications Manager John Martin for putting that together so well. The headline story of this report is the investment in Greenway progress that hit a record $250 million for land acquisition, for planning, design, and construction. From federal programs like DOT's Build to leading states and municipalities like Connecticut and Florida and New York City, investment hit a new high last year in our effort to close gaps and make all of our route as safe as it can be. On page 2, you can see our all-star roster of staff, trustees, and advisory board members. This team, along with our state committees and Greenway Council, can move mountains. And I'm eager to see what we achieve together in the years ahead. They range from inclusive community organizers who are engaging local stakeholders to a world-renowned climate scientist to a leader in the historic Gullah Geechee Cultural Heritage Corridor of the Southeast, to Haliwa Saponi artist Karen Harley, pictured on the right, who painted a map of the indigenous lands of the East Coast Greenway Corridor that we shared in Native American Heritage Month. A picture to the left of Karen is from our fantastic Mid-Atlantic Greenway Summit last April that included great speeches from these inspiring young cycling advocates from Philadelphia. And at that summit, we rolled out an impact report by planners and economic consultants that found over $3 billion in health, environmental, and economic benefits by completing the East Coast Greenway in Greater Philadelphia. It was a tenfold return, and it's a clear case that we are now sharing far and wide with stakeholders to complete the Greenway, both in Greater Philadelphia and the Mid-Atlantic and throughout our 3,000-mile corridor. One focus, a key focus of the report, is inclusive trail development so that these benefits are equitably shared by everyone, especially those that need it most. We help to develop an inclusionary trail planning toolkit with our friends at the Circuit Trail Coalition around Philadelphia, and our staff are integrating best practices from that report into their everyday work. We see great opportunity now in this current moment of solidarity with Black people across the country as a chance for us to work together for real progress. And we aim to work with all of our communities, especially underserved regions, to achieve better outcomes in areas such as health by giving people safe access to active living that is connected to the outdoors and to others. Together, we can reduce obesity, which is a key risk factor in the severity of COVID-19. And we're building community and building bridges to offset the intense divides that threaten our social fabric in this election year. As you can see, as you look at the annual report and our map on the right, we designated 28 new segments of the Greenway in almost all of our 15 states. On the next page, I encourage you to look at our financials. They're solid, we're transparent, and it's a balanced mix of major donors like you, of foundations, of events pulling in resources, businesses, and members. And I'm proud that our expenses, again, focused very efficiently on impact through advocacy and programming, with only 9% going to administration and 7% to fundraising. And then as you explore further, please enjoy the pictures on the next page. The visual highlights from a record year that you made possible, from celebratory ribbon cuttings and uplifting rides to posting signs and inspiring keynote speeches. When the year began, we didn't know how important our financial strength that we have managed to pull together would be. We have seen over $200,000 in revenue disappear as our major events were postponed or made virtual. We adjusted to this change with significant cost cutting, focused on areas such as fewer signs purchased, some salary reduction, and reduced travel that, along with our rainy day fund, keep us in a good position. But there's no guarantee that we stay that way. We depend on you and your continued generosity to turn our shared dream of a completed East Coast Greenway into a reality. And 2020 is our moment. It's the moment when our country and world need us most. More people than ever are seeking the refuge of our Greenway, and we need to provide them with the safest public space we can, so that this recent doubling in biking and walking on our trails is a defining feature of the future that we can build on, rather than a flash in the pan. As you may have seen earlier in the annual report, we've pivoted in this crisis to sharing the importance of investment in Greenway infrastructure as a means to achieve economic recovery, public health, and environmental sustainability. It's now my delight to introduce our Deputy Director, Niles Barnes, and our New England Coordinator, Christine Keeney, who will now share more about that Greenway stimulus effort. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Dennis, and welcome everyone. I just want to reiterate our thanks to your support for the Greenway and for the advocacy and organizing and convening work that myself and all of our staff get to do and that you help make possible. As Dennis mentioned, Christine and I are going to be giving a little behind the scenes tour of our stimulus campaign. I think, like many of you, we share a tremendous responsibility to improve the safety and access for people biking and walking. And the East Coast Greenway is such an amazing, tangible project that allows us to address issues that we care deeply about, like addressing climate change and also providing equity and better safety and access for all people and all the communities that the Greenway travels through. So, what is our Greenway stimulus campaign? It has been an effort to organize East Coast Greenway projects that are ready to go and in more of a construction-ready stage, and also team up with partners across the country who also need more funding to link up their long-distance and regional trail systems. So we have a website, greenway.org/stimulus, where we have captured a lot of the information related to this campaign. As Dennis mentioned, we've seen record use along the East Coast Greenway, different segments along our route. If you can see my screen right now, I'm showing some of the data points in sections of our trail where we have permanent counters. Portland, Maine, a 3x growth in use on the Back Cove Trail. Philadelphia, over 100% increase in use. This is where people want to be. This is where people are going. And now more than ever, we understand how important these essential public spaces are. So many of you may have seen that some emergency recovery money was granted to transit agencies across the country, $25 billion. And active transportation, we know, is a really important component of having a successful transit system, those first and last mile connections. So together we got busy looking at our corridor, our route, and seeing which sections of our corridor and route are ready to go if we got construction funding. So this map is just showing a snapshot of just 50 of the shovel-ready segments that totaled over 210 miles. And I'm going to go ahead and share my screen to give a little bit more of a behind the scenes how we developed this list. So we started working on a list of projects along the East Coast Greenway, identifying the sponsoring agencies, the location, if right-of-way and permits and local funds were lined up, the total length of the project, estimated cost, and construction timelines. We also identified the congressional districts that these projects were located in. And so after we created this spreadsheet just for East Coast Greenway projects, we decided to share it nationally with groups all across the country. And so while our list totaled over 50 different segments and over $400 million in projects, when we shared this with partners around the country, billions of dollars in projects were sent in and captured. And so from that, we developed a pitch for $25 billion for greenways and trails, not just for the East Coast Greenway, but to support the greenways and trails and long distance movement nationwide. And I'm excited to share that since that effort has started, we have over 150 organizations from 33 states that have signed on to our call for a Greenway stimulus effort. And this includes some national organizations like the Trust for Public Land and the Sierra Club, to local and statewide groups. And if weighted for population, what this would mean, for example, in the New England region, is that this could be $1 billion to go towards matching state and local funds to build out trails across the region. And Christine's going to share a little bit about some of the projects in her region, but we're incredibly excited. This campaign is also taking place during a transportation reauthorization happening at the federal level. And so we've already had some wins as part of that. The House Transportation Infrastructure Committee, for example, has included a transportation marker bill that we were advocating with, along with our partners at the Rails to Trails Conservancy. So we're seeing tangible wins, and we're also seeing an appreciation from organizations across the country that signed on to our letter and onto our efforts. So I'm going to hand it over to Christine, and then I'm also happy to answer questions at the end of the webinar.
Thank you, Niles. And thank you again to everyone on this call for your past and present and future support of the East Coast Greenway. It's very much appreciated. I'm happy to be here in Maine to talk to you about a little bit more about the Greenway stimulus effort and some more specifics. That sign-on letter that Niles mentioned with over 150 organizations in support of it. There are, in addition to the national organizations, there also are regional and local groups as well that are supporting this effort, including some you might know, like the Bicycle Coalition of Maine, Mass Bike, the Rhode Island Bicycle Coalition, the Mystic River Watershed Association in Massachusetts, the New Hampshire Seacoast Greenway, and the City of PBD, Massachusetts, to name a few. And like Niles mentioned, these projects range from Maine to Florida, and some of the projects that we identified that are shovel ready include a section of the Casco Bay Trail in Portland, Maine, the Kennebunk and Wells section of the Eastern Trail, also in Maine, some trailheads for the New Hampshire Seacoast Greenway project that's under design. In Massachusetts, important projects like the Mystic River Bridge crossing, which is a key regional connection between the Northern Strand Community Trail, which ends in Everett and Boston, the Swampscott Rail Trail Phase 2 project in Swampscott, Massachusetts, which Phase 1 is actually just completed. You can go out there and ride it right now. And then also some sections of the Mass Central Rail Trail, and the Cape Cod Rail Trail, and another phase of the Mattapoisett Rail Trail as well in Massachusetts, and a few in Rhode Island as well, including the Wooney River Greenway and the Trestle Trail section that would connect the Rhode Island to Connecticut East Coast Greenway section. So lots of really important projects, and really appreciate working with all of you and other partners to identify those needs. Just a little bit more information on the Greenway stimulus effort. After we had received such a great positive response from all of our partners, we reached out to congressional delegations from Maine to Florida in order to share the support and the vision for a Greenway stimulus effort as a response to recovery from this pandemic. And we luckily received positive responses from several congressional offices, particularly in New England, which included Senator Susan Collins of Maine, Senator Shaheen of New Hampshire, Senators Markey and Elizabeth Warren in Massachusetts, and Senator Whitehouse in Rhode Island, as well as representatives from each state, including Representative Pingree in Maine, Pappas in New Hampshire, Presley in Massachusetts, and Langevin in Rhode Island. And these conversations are ongoing with congressional staff, and there's a lot of things happening at the federal level regarding transportation reauthorization and additional recovery efforts that we continue to remain engaged with our local partners, regional, state, and federal partners as well, to ensure that bicycling and walking infrastructure is included in the definition of infrastructure as we look to recover from the current crisis. So that's all that I'm going to share now for the Greenway stimulus effort. Like Niall said, please go to greenway.org/stimulus to learn even more about these efforts and how you can reach out to your congressional leaders as well to support it. And right now I'm going to pass the virtual mic over to our Summit and Events Specialist, Devin.
Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you to you all for being here. I know we're living in unprecedented times, so connecting virtually is new for everyone, but lucky to be able to have that opportunity. I want to just echo my colleagues and appreciate your support over the years and for tuning in today. So I'm going to give a little highlight about our events from last year and this year, and just kind of go through what those were. So if folks don't know me, sorry, I'm Devin. So I'm an event specialist for East Coast Greenway. I see some familiar names, so hi to all of you who I know. So early last year, we had our Mid-Atlantic Summit. It was our first ever Mid-Atlantic Summit, took place in Philadelphia. Hugely successful event with over about 200 participants. I want to say we got to 225 involved in both breakout sessions indoors. We had over 20 presentations and 5 outdoor mobile workshops. During that event, we had a great keynote by Mitchell Silver, Commissioner of New York City Parks Department, and also released our regional impact report that Friday over lunch. And just was a really great time to connect with our partners, working on the Circuit Trails network there, and to convene as a staff in person in Philly. At the end of last year in November, we had our final leg and 9th year of the Week a Year tour, which I've learned in 9 years raised over $500,000 for the Greenway, and this final year raised over $80,000. And it was an amazing bike ride from Titusville, Florida to Key West, about 400 miles. And as a staff participating on this trip, I cannot speak to how amazing that time was together with a number of our members and donors being a part of that, and riding together and sharing meals and conversations, and just having a great time. Dodging some rain and heat too in Florida in November. And Dave Reed, hi Dave, put together a great video, which is available on our website, but also on our YouTube and Facebook if folks want to check that out. This past April, we plan to convene with a number of you and other partners and friends in Jacksonville, Florida for our Southeast Summit, but given the pandemic, we had to pivot. I think pivot is the theme for 2020 now, and I'm sure as many of you know, it's been a learning curve for all of us, but I'm happy to report that our team is well versed in pivoting, and we decided on March 13th to go virtual with our Southeast Summit, which happened on Friday, April 3rd, I believe, and we had about 12 sessions, a number of industry thought leaders from our Southeast region and beyond, and had a great full day talking about the future of trails in the Southeast and generally related to the Greenway. And the response from that event was overwhelmingly positive, and we are extremely grateful for the experience and time to put that together. And as such, we're able to pivot for our inaugural, soon to be inaugural, New York to Philly fundraising bike ride. So we had a great successful launch of that ride with over 300 people signed up, and we plan to have that May 16th and 17th, starting in Battery Park in Manhattan, and over 2 days with an overnight in Princeton, and ending in Center City, Philadelphia. And based on our pivoting from the Southeast Summit, we are prepared to connect with you all on this ride for next year. We sent out a message this morning confirming that we will be moving that ride to 2021, and we are excited to continue that momentum for the ride. And I have personally ridden the route and can speak to the excitement that we know will generate in person when it's safe to convene again. And so we look forward to having some of you on that ride, and also having a number of you engage with us for our future Boston to Portland ride, which we have yet to formally announce, but are planning to do in Christine's region, and engage with some of our longtime supportive members and donors there too. So we could not have predicted where we are, but we are so happy to be in this space together and to be able to reach folks in this new virtual way. So thank you for being with us and for supporting us, and for continuing with us in this work. So I'm going to pass it over to Dennis to introduce Debbie Sharp.
Thank you so much, Devin. You've really given us more capacity than ever for our events, and we're so appreciative and grateful for your great work. Again, whether it was executing with the Week a Year tour and other events like the Mid-Atlantic Summit, or it's being flexible and ready to change plans and adjust. You've done remarkable work for us. Thank you. Now, I have the pleasure of introducing one of our lead donors, Debbie Stein Sharp of Massachusetts. A native of Vermont, she and her husband Jim bike with their young grandchildren all over Boston and beyond. And they're also one of the first donors to have biked the whole East Coast Greenway from Maine to Florida. And they did it as part of that 9-year Week a Year tour. They're some of the warmest and caring people you'll ever ride with. And one of the best things about them is they take time to enjoy ice cream along the way. So without further ado, I'd like to share the microphone with Debbie.
Thank you, Dennis, for that kind introduction. We do like to make sure that ice cream is part of every day of riding if possible. My husband, Jim, and I were introduced first to the East Coast Greenway Alliance by our friend Peter Sargent, who owned a bike shop in Kennebunkport, Maine, many years ago. And we loved the idea of a long distance route down the East Coast, connecting cities. And over the years, we took the opportunity to ride with the East Coast Greenway Alliance. Our first ride was in the Czech Republic with Karen Votava and Beth Brody and Beth's sister. It was an amazing trip to experience what the East Coast Greenway could be and should be, to help us envision the dream. And last fall, we completed, after 9 weeks, as you heard, with the Week a Year tour, the full East Coast Greenway. And we support the East Coast Greenway to help others envision the dream and to help them make the dream a reality. 3,000 miles of safe travel from Maine to Florida, or just around your local area if you happen to be lucky enough to be on the East Coast Greenway in your hometown. Thank you very much. I hope everybody continues to support it.
Thank you so much, Debbie. Really appreciate you sharing and all your support. I may have even had the pleasure of hearing one of your grandchildren out there in the house during that. Thank you for making the time today to share. Your philanthropy is a model for all of us, and really appreciate that. And in an effort to continue this tradition of supporting a healthy and equitable and sustainable future for everyone, moving the Greenway forward, I'm happy to share an exciting announcement. An anonymous donor just gave us a challenge pledge of $25,000. And the question now is, can we match that generosity by the end of August? That kind of support would keep us healthy going into the fall, and it would keep this this momentum that we have right now in this special moment in history where the Greenway is needed and we can deliver, we can build it out. We have a lot of people that we're speaking with in terms of Greenway stimulus, but we're also working hard on the state level, municipal level, county level with this outstanding team of volunteers and staff working on the initiative. So you can donate online at greenway.org/donate. And of course, we can send you our address or a reply card if that would help you, if you'd like to do so by mail. And our development manager, who's been very active in chat, Debbie West, also of Durham, North Carolina, with Niles and me and others here in the headquarters, we're available to help you anytime. So please reach out anytime. We want to make this process of partnership convenient and fun and easy. And now what we want to do is dig deeper. We want to spend the next 15 minutes or so, perhaps more, if you'd like, talking about what you would like to dig into more deeply. And so I'd like to ask everyone to consider typing in questions in the Q&A section of the Zoom platform down at the bottom. And we'll do our best to share our thinking and further updates. And while you're typing, I want to mention that we're wrapping up a successful strategic plan period this year. And so over the next 9 months, we'll be getting a lot of input from everyone, including you. And we'll be sending out a survey to you by the fall and would love your involvement in that process. Please share any and all ideas because we want to ensure that we're considering any new innovations that can help us achieve our mission of a completed Greenway for all. So Devin, have you seen some questions for us yet?
Yeah, so we've had some questions come in before, and I'll encourage folks to drop in the chat, but can you talk a little bit about the way that Greenway is dealing with the pandemic as an organization and, the ECG as a whole?
Absolutely. And Devin, you shared some great words on that in terms of events, which of course, that's been a really, one of the more challenging elements because we can't have in-person events right now. We don't want to endanger anyone. We want to continue to have a great partnership with our local and state partners and federal partners as well. So that has been one thing where we thought, okay, instead of in person, let's put on some great virtual events like this one right now, and also like the Southeast Summit, which was fantastic. And also this idea of Greenway Games in early August, where we all wanted to be watching the Olympics and getting inspired, even if we're a little older and just pretending at this point, but to get inspired about athleticism and being active. And so we're encouraging everyone to get out on the Greenway in early August as part of Greenway Games virtually. So, there's a lot of different ways. And of course, we want to be respectful. And we did donate as an organization to a number of causes that throughout the corridor. There are some local soup kitchens in the Bronx, and in Philadelphia, there's a food bank. There was here in Durham, there was a housing urban ministries organization, nonprofit doing good work, where we didn't make huge donations, but obviously we are a part of these amazing, wonderful communities throughout our corridor, and we want to share when we can. And this is a time of need, and there's a great need for us to complete the Greenway, and there's also a great need for us to continue to build community and bring people together. I welcome anyone else in sharing, Devin, Niles, and others, if you have some other thoughts on that great question.
I can't believe I forgot to mention the Greenway Games, but Debbie has dropped a link to that in the chat. So,
oh, excellent. Thank you,
Debbie. So a couple of questions that have come in, Dennis, and I think Niles and maybe Christine, you might be able to provide some thoughts on this, but Christopher is asking how successful are ECG advocates at applying for and receiving project funds from state DOTs through the transportation alternatives or other DOT funding programs, and also asking about recreational trails programming, usually administered through state resource agency, except Maryland and DC DOTs. Give
So
some on that.
absolutely. I'll just start. And I want to say, our Deputy Director, Niles, does a tremendous job. He was our Southeast leader back many years ago, and then he grew into his leadership position as Deputy Director, where he's leading this just incredible crew of regional coordinators that are making it happen. And they are just such pros at working with volunteers and finding the right state level, federal level, county and municipal level at times funding sources. But I'll turn the microphone to Niles to share some more detail, and Christine as well, potentially.
Yeah, Christine, feel free to chime in from your region, since you have some states that have been the best at tapping into federal funds. But Christopher, as you know, federal transportation money has been transformative for the Greenway, and the ability of metropolitan planning organizations to program in East Coast Greenway segments that feed into statewide transportation improvement programs is critical. So generally, it's covered 80% of the funding to build out segments of the East Coast Greenway. The Transportation Alternatives program has been transformative, has had some more discretionary programs like the U.S. DOT Tiger program that's been rebranded as BUILD. Over $40 million in BUILD dollars from federal DOT came to projects along the East Coast Greenway in 2019, including a bridge in South Carolina that will make one of our most dangerous crossings over the Ashley River into one of the most safe and spectacular water crossings, and also improvements to the Miami Underline section of the East Coast Greenway. But Christine has a lot of experience at East Coast Greenway, and then even before in her previous job, working with these programs too. So Christine, anything you'd like to share as well?
Sure. Yeah, the Transportation Alternatives Program and the Recreational Trails Program, also known as RTP, are some of the absolutely key funding sources in all of our states. We even have some states, like, for example, the state of Maine, where it is the only source of dedicated funding for bicycle and pedestrian and trail infrastructure at all. So without that, particularly in the state of Maine, there wouldn't be much to go on. So those are obviously super important programs. In terms of applying for them, we actually work with our partners, particularly, which are usually municipalities, for example. So we actually support the grant applications that they submit to those programs, so that the funding flows to the municipalities, and we are more of a support team, technical assistants, planners, those sorts of things. So we are happy whenever we can support our partners and municipalities in applying for those programs. There are some challenges, for example, in rural states, like Maine, for example, where the RTP program, when you subtract the administration dollars out of it annually, is under $900,000 total for the state of Maine for RTP. And as you probably know, Christopher, multi-use trails per mile run $1 to $2 million. So we definitely have some challenges in terms of, particularly in more rural states with lower populations, but often can have longer distances that need to be covered. So, we definitely, those are amazing programs, and we continue to work with our partners on those, and also talking to our federal partners and congressional delegations about some of the issues and some of the opportunities to strengthen some of those programs going forward. So hopefully that answers your question.
Thank you, Christine. Question from Joe. Hi, Joe. Good to see you here. What's a good way for riders to raise the visibility of the Greenway in their community? And how can we influence our local politicians to support these kinds of initiatives? And I think Christine's touched on that a little bit, but Dennis and Niles, if you want to kind of follow up to that. what are your thoughts?
Definitely. Well, getting out there, being responsible, maybe putting that mask on, I think that's a really important step. We're part of the community. We're showing that we care about our own health, but then the care about the health of everyone in our community. But being vocal and again, like sharing East Coast Greenway, the logo. We'd love to provide everyone with all the information they'd like so that they can share the website. It's one of the easiest websites in the world, greenway.org. We want people to buy into this vision. And if it's someone who's thinking about economics, share that impact report on Greater Philadelphia. If it's someone who is moved by climate change, let's talk about how the transportation sector is the leading sector of emissions in the United States. And there's no way that we tackle climate change without changing how we move in our country. And greenways and trails can be an important part of that. We should be talking about equity and how we're building public space for everyone to enjoy, and particularly people who have not had access historically to these again, sanctuaries of sanity, these havens of health, as Mitchell Silver talks about them. So there's different angles depending on the audience, but it is really important to continue to share this inspiring vision that we share together. We can't do it alone as a staff or with the board. We need to work with our donors and all these constituents. That's who the federal officials and the city council members, that's who they're listening to. So let's be vocal and be a part of a really positive change.
Niles, do you want to add anything to that, and it's okay if you don't?
No, that's great.
Okay.
I'll just add one more quick thing. I'm the projects person at heart, and I just want to say, in addition to sharing all this great information about the Greenway and how it can be a solution for so many of the issues in our country, I would just also advise you to please plug into infrastructure projects that are going on either in your town or your region or your state. There are opportunities to provide public comment, whether that's through an email or a letter or a phone call to your city councilor or your state representative. If you engage in those ways and make your voice heard, that these projects are important. So when a bridge is being replaced, it's not just being replaced as it was when it was built 50 years ago. It's being replaced with safer biking and walking infrastructure, because that bridge is going to be in place for the next 50 to 100 years. So those are key projects where if we can get involved, and our supporters and our donors, we can all get involved together and lift up the importance of completing the East Coast Greenway and safe biking and walking infrastructure for everyone. We can make project by project differences, and that's how we're going to complete the Greenway. So, and then lastly, I'll just say, if you hear of an infrastructure project that you think is on the Greenway route, might be on the Greenway route, please reach out to your regional coordinator and let them know, because we only hear so many things, and there's projects, paving projects, bridge projects that pop up, and we might not hear about them. So please let us know. Even if you think we might know about them, we might not. So please let us know, and we're happy to engage on any of those projects to come to a public meeting, in the future, maybe in person or on Zoom in the meantime. So thank you.
Thanks, Christine. Yeah, we don't know we don't know what we don't know, and I think we're a small team, so having folks like you as our literal eyes and ears on the ground for those sorts of projects and ongoing things is really important. And the importance of ECG being in the plan is will lead to future funding. So we appreciate that. Kind of as a dovetail to what you're mentioning, Dennis, Pat King says, using the greenways during this time, we have found that bathrooms are not particularly convenient. I know that this is not part of our initial goal, but in the future, how might we help to make our greenway a really convenient place to be for long rides? Have you had any feedback on conveniences along the Greenway?
Great question. I'm really happy to share that we gotten a guide funded by the 1772 Foundation between New Haven, Connecticut, and Providence, Rhode Island. And it's going to be the first very comprehensive guide that talks through elements like lodging and perhaps bathrooms, and sort of dive deeper than you take a right, you take a left, you go down the hill, that kind of thing. Not just directions, but how do we enjoy the experience? Let's talk about the rich history of that region. Let's talk about the nature that you may see for the first time that you've never seen. So we're really excited about diving into that on the guide, sort of. And that will be a model, hopefully, that feeds into a 3,000-mile guide that we'll work on in the years ahead. No promises. 1772, this guide in New England will be available next year, so by next summer. And then perhaps 1 or 2 summers afterward, we could put together a great one for all 3,000. But in terms of how do we help out and sort of setting up these assets and providing for an enhanced Greenway experience, not just telling people about it, but how can the East Coast Greenway Alliance be a part of enhancing and improving the experience? That's something that we want to do. And that's a next level. It's perhaps something we dive into deeper with this upcoming strategic plan. But something we were thinking of doing in Georgia this year is to have a big campaign to raise funds toward planning and design, not just raising funds for our own operations, which is generally your donations help us advocate very effectively. And historically, we turn every dollar donated into over $50 of Greenway investment. So it's an excellent investment to invest in the East Coast Greenway Alliance. But then can we take it a step further by not only raising enough for the right amount of programming at the scale that our Maine to Florida corridor needs and the advocacy, but then can we do matching grants? Whether it's to maintain current sections that are getting a little bumpy from the tree roots, or maybe it's to help with the planning grant or design, the design funds that are needed to then get it shovel ready, and then we can get it done. So we do want to get involved in that this decade, in the next few years, and working together with all of you, I think we can really make a difference. And in that way, we'll be giving back even more to the local communities that we serve. So I'm very excited about that. Great question.
And another question we got from Al: how much of the ECG will be completed by the end of the next strategic plan, and when will that be?
Could you repeat that? I'm sorry.
How much of the ECG will be completed by the end of the next strategic plan, and when will that be?
Excellent. Well, that's a great question. That's actually a strategic plan question for us to all ask ourselves together and to set those kinds of goals. We set the goal in this strategic plan to build 200 more miles and to bring those online. And we're looking very close. If not, we will probably achieve that goal. So I'm really happy about that. Looking forward, with this current crisis, that does make things a little more muddy in terms of setting that kind of a goal. But Greenway stimulus, when we think what could happen if we had the vision of leaders in the UK right now, where they've invested £2 billion pounds into essentially a Greenway stimulus for biking and walking, because they know that biking and walking is part of the ways out of this COVID crisis. If we get something like that, maybe 25 billion here in the US, population and GDP adjusted, then we could be looking at audacious goals like really completing the whole Greenway by 2030. But that's a very aggressive goal. So at this point, we'll just continue to really, allocate and deploy our resources, our capacity in ways that improve that experience for more and more people. And we'll try to get from, okay, this year, maybe we're the most popular linear park in the country, or park in the country, bar none, 50 million bike rides, runs, and walks. Let's get to 100 million. Then we're really starting to make a difference in public health a lot more. And we're really making a difference on climate change, because that's beginning to transform the way people move. So those are the kinds of goals that we'd love to talk with you, Al, and everybody on the team as we do the strategic planning process. And that will be, Christine and Niles will be looking at, okay, what's already in the pipeline, and then what's possible for us to try to get into the pipeline starting as soon as possible.
And then one last question. Are sections with seldom traveled small country roads going to be designated as completed on-road trail?
It's a great question. Yeah, and that really speaks to the user experience, which is what we're focused on. What is the user experience? We're trying to develop a system for all ages and abilities. And last year, our National Greenway Council put forward a path to designate or exempt sections of the Greenway that did not meet our previous criteria of vehicle separated, speaking to the point of a low traffic road, for example. And our Board of Trustees did approve that policy. So we do have a formal mechanism now. It does require more in-depth inspections by multiple folks inspecting a segment. There has to be a rationale given for why a trail or separated facility could not be built. But to answer the question, yes, we do finally have a policy and a way to exempt segments. We think overall it'll be a fairly small percentage of the East Coast Greenway, but it'll be very much focused on the user experience and building it as safe as possible so that all folks feel comfortable using it.
Thanks, Niles. Not sure if you mentioned this yet, but do we have a goal for planned completion by the end of this year? How much more of trail?
Yeah, we're on deck to designate around 40 miles of trail segments. We're now at the halfway point of the year, and so some construction timelines we have better clarity on. Fortunately, construction has been able to continue on a number of segments that were on deck, but we have had the pause button hit on some other segments. So the end of this year, we will cross a very important milestone, though, over 1,000 miles of completed Greenway, Maine to Florida. And we're looking forward to a lot more getting in the pipeline for 2021. And hopefully the advocacy efforts will also position us well to receive what we hope is significant increased funding starting in 2021.
Got about 5 minutes left. Dennis, do you have anything else to add before we wrap up?
Sure. Barring any other questions, and yes to 1,000 miles plus, and I'm seeing so many really nice comments. I want to thank everyone. There was one question about, well, can I buy this? And yes, indeed, everyone can. And there's actually, the website is in the chat section. You can see it, greenway.org/greenway-gear. And we actually, that's one of the areas where we have achieved our income goal for the year in merchandise because these are so popular, and the team's doing such a great job sharing the word about the Greenway. And so I do want to thank, and unless there's any other questions, we can finish a little bit early. You all are amazing. We value your generous donations and support. We value the time that you give to the East Coast Greenway. And again, we hope that you're able to get through this crisis with your family intact and okay. Thank you so much for joining us today. And thank you for considering further support to match that $25,000 challenge that's in front of us. We really can build on the audacious vision that Karen Votava and Pat King and so many other heroes and heroines put forward, and that we're trying to get done together. We're trying to build community. We're trying to foster public health, environmental sustainability, and an equitable economic future that really supports everyone. And it's an incredible path from Canada to Key West. So as soon as we can, I hope, and all of us, we hope to see you out on the Greenway, whether we're marveling at moose or marveling at manatees, whether we're enjoying lobster and blueberry pie or a low country boil and key lime pie. I'm very excited to be with all of you soon. And I hope you and your family again have a wonderful summer despite the challenging times. Thanks for joining us today. Thank you.
Thanks, everybody. See you on the trail.
Thank you.